Justin's slides were in there before mine.
I completely spaced them out.
That's okay. That's
This
what
is
you
what I
got.
did weeks ago, see, you expect people to remember stuff from one day to the next, not 4 weeks to 4 weeks, right?
That's why you got us.
That's why I'm old, see, I'm so old, I can't remember anything. Rick and I have already done this conversation, so you think about not remembering stuff. Because you took the project, you got it, you got it.
I am terrified of the I hate that.
Bookshelf gets full,
Yeah,
cram one on one end, one falls on
drop
the
the
other.
other one off, that's right.
Right on.
Yes, if you're still coming in. Ready. Should I start? All right, we're going to call the meeting to order Tuesday, February 9th, 2021 at 7 PM. And we'll start with roll call from the left.
Dr. Joseph Ford, council member.
Homer Henry, council member.
Mike Warrington, City Council member.
Troy Tabor, City Council President.
Ronnie Price, Mayor.
Tim Berry, Council Member.
Shelby Carcelari, council member.
And tonight we have Pastor Daniel Ivy of Anchor Baptist Church here to lead invocation.
Let's pray. Dear Lord, as we come to you in prayer this evening, we are thankful for everything that you've done for us. Pray that you would just grant wisdom tonight in all of the decisions that need to be made. We thank you for your watch care over us, and we pray that you would continue to watch over us, that you would, that your will would be accomplished in each and every decision tonight. We thank you for the willingness of each person here tonight to give of their time, and we just we ask that you would also be with our police and our fire forces as they serve and protect us, keep them safe. Be with our city workers as they this week are going to be clearing roads and keeping things safe for the rest of us. I pray that you would just watch over them as well and just help us to accomplish everything that needs to be accomplished tonight. We ask all these things in Jesus' name. Amen.
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 Amen. Thank you. Let's stand for the Pledge of Allegiance, please.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, at this time, we're going to open it up for a public forum. If anybody has anything they'd like to say, state your name, address, and keep it under 3 minutes. Anybody? No? All right, onward and upward. We got a lot to do tonight, so let's try to keep it tight and rolling. Acceptance of agenda.
Jenny, is there any changes?
There are no changes. We did make one update today. There were a couple typos in the resolution related to the amended and restated TIF Area 1 plan, and that resolution of intent had a couple of typos fixed, but the actions are the same.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes, sir.
I move to accept the agenda as modified, or I'm sorry, as presented with the modifications at the time of the meeting tonight.
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
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 All opposed? Motion carries 6-0. 7, awards, Police Chief Keller.
Thank you, sir. Tonight, we get to give out 3 awards. First award we're going to give out, we tried to do this back, I think it was October, and we postponed it because of COVID. So we're going to do that one, and then we have our 2 annual awards. So I'm going to start out with, on August 26th, 2020, around 8:30 p.m., Butler County EMS and Andover Fire and Rescue were dispatched to 151 South Monticello Drive in Andover for a possible code blue. What that means is someone's not breathing. The call first came out over Butler County EMS channel with Officer Michael Hampton overheard the call and responded without being dispatched. Officer Hampton was the first emergency responder to arrive on scene, arriving within 2 minutes of the call coming out. Upon arrival, he was directed to go upstairs by the wife of the victim. Debbie, the wife, had been doing chest compressions on her husband. Officer Hampton asked if she had given any breaths to the subject, and she had said no. Officer Hampton then instructed Debbie to give her husband 2 rescue breaths. After giving 2 breaths, Officer Hampton was able to see the victim's chest rise. Debbie was then instructed to give 2 more rescue breaths with no movement. Officer Hampton took over chest compressions. About 20 chest compressions in, he instructed Debbie to give more breaths. At this point, Butler County EMS arrived on scene and took over the CPR. And they were able to get a pulse back shortly after their arrival. EMS lieutenant that had responded said that had it not been for the quick response and quick actions of Officer Hampton, the situation and health of Morris could have gone much differently. Officer Hampton's fast response and actions provided enough time for Butler County EMS to arrive on scene and take over with their equipment. Additionally, Lieutenant Damon Cundiff, former Lieutenant Damon Cundiff, is a neighbor of this family, and he visited them a few days later in the hospital where the victim was in ICU but doing well and has since made a full recovery. Unfortunately, they're not able to be here with us tonight, but I'd like to call Officer Hampton up. Officer Michael Hampton. We just got the awards here. To give him, this was reviewed and approved by our awards board. Officer Michael Hampton to receive our life-saving award.
No, I wish Mr. and Mrs. Griffin could have been here tonight. It's unfortunate that they couldn't make it, but that's okay. I haven't been able to see them since the incident, so I was looking forward to maybe talking to his wife and giving her congratulations, because really, she did a lot of the work too. I mean, she was doing it before I got there, and so if there was one I could give to her, I'd give her one as well. So,
Thank you, sir.
you're welcome.
Mike is also here with his wife, Amy, by the way. Okay, now we get to go on to our annual awards, which is our Officer of the Year and our Civilian of the Year. In the last few years, we've done this as a surprise where we've brought the individuals under false pretenses to this meeting and then surprised them in the middle of that. We didn't do that this year. The officer and civilian staff member are both here with their families, and were basically awarded this, or announced anyways, a couple weeks ago. So before I begin tonight with these awards, I wanted to point out 2 things. First, the 2 department members being recognized tonight were recognized and nominated by their peers for these awards, with the nominations being reviewed and approved by an awards committee from within the department.
Second, this year, like the past couple of years, neither award recipient tonight is being recognized because of any one incident that occurred in 2020, but more for their dedication, commitment, and effort that they put into their jobs every single day during this unprecedented year. As we all know, 2020 has been unlike any year we have ever seen. Our department went through many changes, a couple of resignations, a few promotions, and COVID-19. Before I go on, I want to call up Sergeant Mickey Ferris. Should have did that first. Mickey, come on up here while I read this. One person that comes to mind as an individual who stepped up and faced every challenge, every change, and every opportunity presented to him last year was Sergeant Mickey Ferris. Mickey is one of the hardest working officers that you will ever meet. Mickey is always the first to ask if someone needs help with anything and is so appreciative if he receives help from anyone else. In 2020, with patrol being short-staffed after a couple of resignations and COVID-19 quarantines, Sergeant Ferris worked many hours of overtime, covering shifts on other crews, even working extra duty jobs within Andover, a community service provided by our department. As everyone knows, Mickey lost his longtime K-9 Thor in 2019 quite suddenly, and Mickey never missed a beat, continuing to be dedicated to the department and the Kansas Police Dog Association, an organization that he once was president of. In April of 2020, Sergeant Ferris stepped up again and took over the training and handling of a second K-9 Rocco, after Officer Smith was offered a position as a school resource officer. In 2020, Mickey was a big part of planning, organizing, and hosting the 2020 Kansas Police Dog Association's Fall Training Conference and Certification here in Andover, helping to coordinate the training schedules, training locations, lodging, and meals for all the attendees, as well as soliciting and collecting many of the conference gifts and prizes for the participants. Additionally, Sergeant Ferris played a major role each year in assisting the Andover Police and Fire Foundation in their annual calendar fundraiser, both with the solicitation of local businesses, sponsorships, and the deliveries of the calendar, which we witnessed the other day, the mayor and I. Commitment is one of the department's values. Each day, expect to do your best. Sergeant Mickey Ferris does this every single day. He is always willing to help anyone with anything. He comes to work with a positive attitude and works hard every day. Therefore, having met the requirements of our general orders recommended by the awards board, it's my honor to present Sergeant Mickey Ferris with our department's 2020 Officer of the Year Award.
I would just like to tell you how humbled I am for this award. 2020, in my eyes, has been for our police department very challenging with the COVID and a lot of the police things going on in the country. I feel that if I could, every man and woman on the police department would receive this. Thank you.
Sergeant Ferris, or Mickey, is also here with his wife, Melissa. Okay, on to our Civilian of the Year Award. I have Eric Westbrook come up and join me. Dispatchers are always, you never get to see them. You only talk to them on the phone and hear them over the radio. So, Master Communications Officer 3, Eric Westbrook, has been dedicated employee of the Andover Police Department since October of 2008 and is the only communications officers to have earned the rank of MCO 3 at this time. Aside from normal dispatching duties, Communications Officer Westbrook is in charge of all National Crime Information Center validations for the police department, making sure warrants and stolen items are entered into the system correctly. As a result of his attention to detail during his time, the department has never been late on a validation or had an item purged from the system due to inactivity. MCO Westbrooks is also in charge of all of our dog licensing records, which we've been going through and changing here recently, receiving and inputting dog license records received from the various vet clinics, as well as reconciling animal shelter invoices and the receipts from all of the shelters or clinics. MCO Westbrook has shown himself to be a dedicated and exemplary employee. According to Director Day, MCO Westbrook is willing to take on tasks and help with any assignment and has never had a performance counseling or reprimand in his entire career with us. I don't know about Augusta. Eric is always willing to pick up extra shifts to cover for a sick dispatcher or cover leave for fellow coworkers. And this isn't in here, but I can tell you this year we've had a lot of that and still having a lot right now. Additionally, Eric is forward thinking in dispatching calls. MCO Westbrook will dispatch the call to get officers en route and continue to gather information from the caller, providing such for officers while in transit to the incident, thus multitasking, saving time, and providing a fast response for our citizens. Eric will often anticipate the needs of the officers on calls by looking up information such as phone numbers or addresses before even being asked by the officer. Officers have commented on how they appreciate the extra effort MCO Westbrook puts in by having the needed information for reports and accidents already printed off for them when they return to the station. For the last 12 years, MCO Westbrook has shown himself to be a dedicated, loyal employee of the Andover Police Department. Eric has continued to take on additional tasks and responsibilities during his tenure and continues to cover shifts for others whenever asked. Therefore, having met the requirements of our general orders and recommended by our awards board, I have the privilege of presenting MCO 3 Eric Westbrook with the department's 2020 Civilian of the Year Award. I actually figured that in private, you can't shut Eric up. But I figured he wouldn't speak. I wanted to add one more quick thing because I know you have a long agenda. Both of these two individuals, Officer of the Year and a Civilian of the Year of the award, besides receiving our awards, each of these award recipients tonight, thanks to a very generous resident, is going to receive 3 days and 3 nights stay at Grand Lake in Oklahoma at this individual's private vacation house.
Nice.
Later this summer. They get to pick 3 days to go down there and enjoy. I think the individual wanted to stay anonymous, so I'll leave it at that. Any questions? Thank you, sir.
Right. Presentation 8-1, Police Chief Keller. 8-1, you want to?
I'm
You wanna
happy to
introduce?
introduce this. Dr. Eric Fritsch is here. He's done the staffing study that the City Council reviewed throughout 2020, and he's here to relay not just to you all, but to the public as well, the findings of that study.
Good evening.
Evening.
Thank you for having me. Wish it was a tad bit warmer. Came in from the Dallas area, so. But I'm here. We had a conversation in late June regarding some of the preliminary findings and recommendations for the staffing study. So I'm here tonight to talk about kind of the final recommendations and where we sit right now. So. So just going to have a brief presentation on kind of the experience that I have the methodology that we utilized in conducting the study, and then the major findings and recommendations that we provided in the report moving forward. And basically, the design of this was to create a 5-year strategic staffing plan for the Andover Police Department. And I'm out of the Dallas area, as I mentioned. I do these types of studies really all over the country. I usually have about 6 to 8 studies that I do at any particular time. Some focus on patrol specifically, because that's the hardest part of an organization to determine appropriate staffing levels. It's mathematically challenging, I guess, is the best way to say that. And so some I do patrol, some I do every box on the organizational chart, which is what I did for Andover Police Department. And then I've done some work internationally too with Riyadh, Saudi Arabia, and the Norwegian National Police, and Turkish Gendarmerie, which is their military police. It's basically our sheriff's department is what gendarmeries are. So I've done some work internationally. And so what I'm going to go through is kind of the methodology and then our findings and recommendations. But basically, we did this through most of 2020. It started in 2019. And so when I talk about data, the data that we used is calendar year 2019 data. But the study really was conducted for the most part throughout 2020. And so that's why you see things like Zoom discussions and things like that. So that was the sign of the times. But met with, so it's kind of quantitative, qualitative. So on the qualitative side, met with the chief on multiple occasions, had phone conversations with him and his command staff, met with the city administrator. I was at a conference with y'all, or a work session with y'all in June, having discussions about really about staffing the police organization, but also the level of police service that you want to provide to the citizens of Andover, because that's really how I approach police staffing is that it is individualistic to a particular agency in a particular city, and it's about the level of service you want to provide. And so we had that conversation about response times and calls for service and those types of conversations. And obviously, the other side of it is the data side. So pulled data, and I'll talk about it as we move on, but pulled data from both the city of Andover and the Andover Police Department regarding calls for service and response times, and how long it takes to answer a call for service, and various other measures that we'll get into briefly. And then also apply kind of any kind of nationally recognized standards that are out there, like what is a reasonable priority one response time? What should we be shooting for when it comes to that? Or are there any kind of contemporary staffing standards about how much time officers should spend on what we'll talk about as self-initiated activity? And most of what I do is all quantitative. It's very math, statistical oriented, and we'll talk about that in general without going into the specifics about the algorithms and stuff that's utilized. But the kind of the initial, anytime I do a staffing assessment, the initial part is to look at patrol. And so patrol is always the largest part of the organization. That's where most of the personnel are housed. And so I've built a model that the acronym's MAP, but it's the model for the allocation of patrol personnel. Takes into account, depending on the jurisdiction, somewhere around 35 to 40 different variables are inputted into this model. So how it works is basically it takes a traditional workload model. So looking at calls for service, looking at the average service time for those calls for service, looking at your self-initiated activities, so traffic stops the officers are making, other kinds of self-initiated activities, administrative activities. So whether that may be report writing, or that is shift briefing, or that's preparing for a shift, or that's end of shift activities, lunch breaks are accounted for, those types of activities. And then your personnel leave. So vacation leave, sick leave, military leave, FMLA, all those types of things in a traditional kind of workload model. But then we look at performance objectives for the law enforcement agency. And that's kind of what we had our conversation about in June is what kind of response times do you want for the city of Andover? When they call, how fast do you want an officer to arrive? And so traditional performance objectives for patrol entities, such as response times, visibility, having an officer available who can immediately respond to a call for service. Those types of performance objectives are also taken into account in this model. The idea is that basically through a bunch of statistics and algorithms, you take into account these 38 variables that I used for Andover PD. And the idea is to validate it by determining how many officers you had in 2019. Because if I can build a model that tells me how many officers you had in 2019, then the model is valid. And so you had a total of 12 officers in 2019, patrol officers. And then when I use the term officers, you have actually 8 officers and 4 sergeants. I kind of merged those together just into one term. So I'll talk about patrol officers, and then you have 4 patrol lieutenants. So the model, the 2019 data-based model, looked at the 12 patrol officers and then the percentage of time, which is about 20% of their time, in which your patrol lieutenants are the primary responders on calls for service. And so if I can build a base model, it's validated, and then the question becomes, okay, now where do we move? So I've got a solid model, it's mathematically sound, where do we go? And so we made some adjustments to the model based upon some areas that were identified. One was calls for service. It's expected, again, this is a model and this is a plan. So it is expected that your calls for service are going to increase. We tied calls for service increases largely to your expected population increase, which is about 2.1% per year. If you exceed those standards, which is my understanding, you've got some developments that may be coming into play that are going to kind of bust that percentage. And so if it does, it's going to have an impact on staffing. But when we were doing this, based upon the knowledge that we had, you're looking at about a 2.1% growth rate. We added a little bit based upon the type of growth that is occurring, both multifamily and commercially, and basically projected out a 2.5% annual growth rate in calls for service. And then obviously there's backup unit responses to some of those calls for service, especially your priority 1 calls for service. We projected out also improvements and increases in self-initiated activity. We actually had the 2019 data, wanted improvements in that, and wanted to provide officers with additional time in which to engage the community. And so we added self-initiated time up to 30% of the shift, which is really everything that's out there when we talk about contemporary staffing standards is between 25 and 33% of a shift being dedicated to self-initiated activities. So it falls right in that realm. Looked at response times. Your response times are very good, very, very good. And so we looked at response times, and really your priority 1 is 4 minute. I don't see that very often. A lot of people would like to have that, but they don't. So what we did is to kind of modulate the impact of some of the additions that we were making regarding projections to calls for service. We actually increased your priority 2 and 3 response times in the model, even though they're set at 8 and 12 minutes, which is still very good response times. You exceed those standards right now. So based upon those input values, the model then tells me how many people you need in order to meet all of that workload and all of those objectives. And so the recommendation is to add 4 patrol officers over the 5-year period. And so it stepped into the report as 1 in 2022, 1 in 2023, and then 2 in 2024. And again, it's based upon those parameters. And if your population increases faster than expected, then your calls for service are going to increase faster than expected. And so that may need to be modified. The other recommendation is tied to staffing is that right now you have a minimum patrol staffing standard of 3 on the streets. When you get 4 additional officers, I made a recommendation that you go to a minimum patrol staffing standard of 4. They'll put 4 officers out on the street. When I talk officers, that includes everybody. So that's lieutenant, sergeant, and officers, that there will be 4 at least present at all times. So that's the patrol side of the study that was done. Also looked at communications. This was kind of done during 2020, so this one's kind of done, but I got it on there anyway. It's in the report. Basically, it's converting. I just built a basic, simple, fixed staffing model for communications, having a communications officer present at all times, 24/7, 365. You need 5 communications personnel based on your leave rate in order to do that. So you had a part-time communications officer position, and the recommendation was to convert that to a full-time position, and you've already done that. So it's been completed. The other recommendation regards your public service officer. It kind of fits with the contemporary staffing standard is that we've moved to taking some things that law enforcement, the police officers do, and moved it into civilian personnel are doing them now. And PSOs or CSOs, sometimes they're public service officers or community service officers. They go by different names, but basically they'll be station personnel, and you have one that's already approved. We've asked for an additional one to be approved in 2025. So there's time for that, but basically this person not only is cross-trained as a dispatcher to help out on dispatch when they're facing the challenges with staffing that they are right now, but they also help because they allow officers to stay out on the street, police officers to stay out on the street by taking reports, minor offenses, walk-in reports, handling fingerprinting responsibilities, and other responsibilities in the front lobby. And basically, when we talked in June, we talked about adding 2 more, which would give you 3. Really, the consensus, I believe, amongst the council members and the mayor was that we wanted to cover the busiest times, which were the afternoon to early evening time period, and 2 people are sufficient to do that. So we made that recommendation. Questions?
That was very detailed, and I appreciate your long work that you did on it for over a year. So I really do appreciate that.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Thank you, Doctor. Did anything as far as 2020 play into, I know you mentioned the leave model. How much of that was taken into account or not taken into account in regards to the numbers?
All data is based on 2019 because whenever I start a project, I always take the prior calendar year, and it just so happened that 2019 was the prior calendar year.
Okay.
I'm doing some now that I'm still using 2019 because I think it's probably more valid, but I'm looking at 2020. We'll see how much different it is.
Thank you.
Okay. Any more? All right. Thank you very much for your time. We
Y'all
appreciate
enjoy your
it.
evening.
Thank you for your hard
Thank you,
work.
Doctor.
Of course.
Excuse me. On to the consent agenda.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes, sir.
I move to approve the consent agenda items 9.1 through 9.6 as presented.
Any further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries 6-0. Okay. At this time, we're number 10-1, zoning amendments, vacation petition 115 West Cloud Avenue Drainage Easement, VA-2020-04. And Jenny, I'm sorry, Les.
No, you're fine. Actually, I'm gonna jump in, and I told Les I was gonna do that, so that wasn't as rude as it looked. I do want to take care of a couple housekeeping items that will pertain to all of the items in zoning amendments 10.1 to 10.4, because I think we can go through these processes a little bit faster than normal because they were all heard at the January 19th Planning Commission meeting. So typically we ask you during every item if you received the minutes from the public hearing. So if we could get consensus now, if you've received the minutes from the January 19th Planning Commission meeting, that would hold for all 4 items.
Yes.
And I should note they are draft minutes. They've not yet been approved.
Yes.
Yes.
In addition to that, I will ask the city clerk if she's received both any protest petitions or any written documentation about any of these items 10.1 through 10.4.
No protest petitions or communications were filed in the office of the city clerk within the required 15 days following the planning commission meeting on January 19th.
So at this time, I'll turn it over to Les for both 10.1 and 10.2, and then we will walk through the necessary checklists for 10.3 and 10.4.
Good evening, Mayor, Council. It's good to be back here in sunny Kansas. It was warmer at 11,000 feet in the Rocky Mountains than it is here in Andover, Kansas.
Welcome back.
The vacation petition in front of you now, item 10.1, is the vacation of a portion of a drainage easement that was discovered during the development of a site plan for this subject property. The conflict came to the site plan review committee. We did a little further analysis and had the engineer do some additional work. Found out that the storm sewer in this particular location didn't consume the entire easement, and that easement was going to conflict with the location of the building. So they've done some survey, determined how much of the easement needs to remain in place to accommodate the existing storm sewer, and are here tonight to ask you to vacate that remainder of easement that's unnecessary. I see the applicant is here, as well as his engineering representative from K.E. Miller.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to recommend to accept the recommendation of the Planning Commission and adopt an order vacating a portion of the front yard drainage easement on the subject property located at 115 West Cloud Avenue.
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, no. Motion carries 6-0. 10.2. Vacation petition 115 West Cloud Avenue Access Control VA-2020-05.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes, sir.
sorry, Les, were you gonna, go ahead.
Go ahead, Homer.
Mr. Mayor, I move to accept the recommendation of the Planning Commission and adopt an order vacating a portion of the access control on Cloud Avenue on the subject property located at 115 West Cloud Avenue.
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. Motion carries 6-0. 10.3 zoning amendment 615 South Ruth Avenue Z-2020-11.
Mr. Mayor, this item before you tonight is a request to change a zoning district classification from SF1, which is single-family residential or low-density district, to MF1, single and two-family residential district. Before we proceed with the hearing, has anyone on the city council have need to disqualify themselves due to a conflict of interest?
No.
Has anybody on the city council received any ex parte verbal or written communications prior to this meeting that they feel they should disclose at this time?
No.
No.
Okay. Then at this time, your zoning administrator, Les Mangus, can provide you a report on the case.
Les.
Mr. Mayor, the Planning Commission held the public hearing as required by the state statute on this zoning case at their January meeting. Contemplated the issue more than anything else about the additional traffic that an additional unit might put on that existing gravel road, and has made a unanimous recommendation to make the change in zoning to the MF1 single and two-family residential district contingent on a dedication of additional street right-of-way to meet the standards set forth in the subdivision regulations.
Is that adjacent to the ones that are already existing?
In that neighborhood, if you could show that zoning map, there is quite a lot of two-family development. One, catty-cornered across the street, is a recent zoning case from just a couple of years ago where a fella has rezoned the property and built a new two-family. But all of those houses on the north side of Cloud Avenue, just a few hundred feet to the north, are two-family dwellings.
Okay.
your comprehensive plan suggests that those properties on the east side of Ruth Avenue should be multifamily, which could accommodate up to apartments. And that this subject property and the properties around it should be single family, which includes a single family attached, a duplex where two dwellings are attached to each other.
Thank you.
Is the applicant here tonight, Les?
I believe, yes.
Did you have anything you'd like to add?
No, I think I'm Eric Triple, I'm representing the landowners. They feel like it's a good fit for the neighborhood, opens up an opportunity for low cost housing for somebody to move in.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes, sir.
and I'd move to adopt the planning commission's findings of fact and recommendation.
Before we do that, we should see if anyone from the public had any comments that they wanted to make. And if so, yes, please do come to the podium so that we can hear you on the television. Okay,
Homer's gonna throw something at me.
now I think we're ready for that.
Thank you. I move to adopt the planning commission's findings of fact and recommendations for approval of zoning case Z 2020-11 and approve an ordinance changing the zoning district classification from SF-1 single family residential low density to MF1 single and two family residential district on property generally located at 615 South Ruth Avenue, Andover, Kansas.
Second.
Any further discussion?
I have an odd question, I guess, on the motion. Why does it say generally located? Can you just say located at?
I
I mean,
think
is
they always
They all
say
do.
that.
I mean, could it like go back and forth a couple feet on each edge or something? I mean, what's the word generally mean in this case? It's might be irrelevant, but I'm just asking the question.
The term generally is used to describe for the public where it is without using a legal description, so you don't have to use the
Oh.
legal description in your motion.
Like
just
the
so
lot and all that stuff.
You got it.
Okay. Thank you for
Generally.
doing that then.
That's a good
It's a
question.
good question, Troy, thank you.
I'd like you to read the legal
actual-
description.
I would have no problem doing this. It's funny.
So,
I made the motion. No second yet?
There was a second.
Oh, there's a second.
Homer seconded it.
oh, I'm sorry. Sorry. No further discussion. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. Motion carries 6-0. Thanks, sir.
And Mr. Mayor, we will interject here that if anyone feels aggrieved by this final decision, they do have 30 days to appeal to district court.
All right, thank you. 10-4 preliminary PUD amendment, the Heritage Z-2020-12. And Les will speak to us about that also.
I'll go through a couple housekeeping
Okay.
real quick. This is an amendment to the preliminary planned unit development for the Heritage and amending Section 7, signs and entry monuments of the development guidelines, general provisions. Like last time, I'm going to ask, does anybody have any need to disqualify themselves from this decision?
No.
No.
And has anyone received any ex parte, verbal or written communications about this item?
No.
Les.
Now Les.
Thank you, Jenny. Again, at that January Planning Commission meeting, the Planning Commission held the required public hearing to consider the amendment to the Heritage Planned Unit Development. Heritage, this is the residential single-family component of the Heritage project. To consider some changes to the bulk regulations for signage. During the review of the site plan package for the signage and landscaping for the project, staff noted that the signs that were proposed and the locations of the signs exceeded the limits of the zoning regulation. I might note that the zoning regulations are very restrictive when it comes to signage for single-family residential development, with just a maximum height of 8 feet. In this case, the landscape architect has designed some very nice signage monuments for the project that slightly exceed the maximum height. You'll notice that these components are columnar and there is a cap. That maximum height of the signage is to the top of the message, not necessarily the top of the structure, so long as it's not a part of the sign. The Planning Commission ultimately recommends the amendment to the PUD, and I see that the audience is full of folks from the Heritage. Jason Gish from MKC's here. He prepared the application. He can answer any specific questions if you have those.
I do have a question, Les. In regards to the amendment, it takes it from a maximum of 8 feet to what is the new maximum then?
That number escapes me. 13 feet.
Thank you, Les.
You know, and if you look at the exhibits provided, you'll see that everything is kind of in a scale.
Looks nice.
That's the one that's the one I like.
Yes.
Yeah.
There's kind of a tower marker at a couple locations that is a little taller and more slender than those typical monuments that are normally much wider than they are tall.
I like the figure of the person.
That's a really cool logo.
I think Jason
Wonder who
took
did
me and put that up there.
It's not me. I don't wear a hat like that.
Kinda does
Mr.
look
Mayor,
like
I'd like to adopt the Plan Commission's findings and facts and recommend the approval of zoning case Z 2020-12 and approve an ordinance amending the Heritage Preliminary Plan Unit Development Plan.
Second.
Before you vote on that, you might see if anybody from the audience would like to speak on the item. It's unlikely, but we'll check. Okay,
Jason, do you want to go?
proceed.
And do they have anything to add? Jason? Jerry?
There was no life-size examples though brought. It'd been nice. So what about, I guess the only question I would have, and I wasn't at that meeting obviously, was line of sight as you're turning out. They're all in a location that it's not going to cause any challenges in that way, I'm assuming.
Certainly. Those site plans are reviewed by our city engineer, and we've also had them reviewed by Trans Systems, who designed Yorktown Parkway. They're not in the required vision triangles for the locations. They're set back well from the curb. They're just right up against the right of way instead of the 15 feet that's typically required.
Thank you.
And Les, this is just for the residential, correct?
Correct.
So when they want to put signage up for the commercial side, will they have to come back, or is the PUD?
But remember that this is a single family residential component.
Okay.
The mixed use has
Different.
several different zones with different standards for signage.
All right. Any further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, say nay. Motion carries 6-0.
And Mr. Mayor, as with the previous item, those aggrieved by the decision do have 30 days to take action in district court.
Thank you. 11-1, Adams Acres 2 subdivision, final plat. Les Mangus will speak to us.
A few months ago, the Adams acquired a beautiful 200-acre property near the intersection of 159th Street and Harry Street, with the intention of dividing that property up for houses for different members of the family. It's a bit of an unusual piece of property. It was a planned unit development back in the early 1980s, which was about the same time that the floodplain maps were first established for Butler County. When that floodplain map was adopted, they realized that there is a large portion of the property that's in the floodplain and couldn't be developed. That plan was scrapped, and the property was held under one ownership for something like 40 years It has an existing house that is on Harry Street and an existing house that is just off of 159th Street, as well as some agricultural improvements. The Adams have had the property surveyed. It's appropriately zoned and a plat prepared for your consideration tonight to accept the dedications thereon. The Planning Commission has approved the plat. Your action tonight is just to accept those dedications.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes, sir.
I move to accept the dedications on the Adams Acres 2 subdivision final plat as approved by the Planning Commission.
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor, aye.
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 All opposed, nay. Motion carries 6-0. 11.2, Developers Agreement. And Lance Onstott will speak to us about this.
Mr. Mayor, Council, our subdivision regulations require that all lots created by a new subdivision like this are served with a public sanitary sewer. Your Department of Community Development noticed or identified that a small, relatively small section of sanitary sewer needed to be extended in order to meet that requirement. Typically, a developer and owner of a subdivision petitions the governing body to utilize special assessment financing to fund these improvements. This particular developer owner is choosing to fund these improvements privately. So that is reflected in this developer's agreement, which is somewhat different than the ones you guys typically see. Notably, and in order for an owner to utilize private funding, they do have to submit still a required financial guarantee, of which the city has received. The city will still oversee and be involved in the construction process, and we will retain that financial guarantee until such time that we accept and approve of the improvement. So I can answer any questions that you may have.
I have a question. Who owns the sewer then after this is done?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. So it is privately funded, but it is a public improvement. It will be a public sewer in a public easement.
Okay.
And I guess kind of building on that, why do you do that then? Why does someone privately do it as opposed to having us do it?
There's probably a number of different reasons a private person might decide to do that. One, when we fund it and issue bonds or debt to pay for it, there's interest associated with that. So they could be choosing to fund it privately to avoid the interest.
And they could also pick their own person to build it as opposed to us putting it for bid.
Same standards will apply, will be involved. They will privately contract with a contractor to make that improvement.
But they don't have to put that out for bid though, right?
Correct.
Okay. Mr. Mayor?
Yes, sir.
I move to approve the developers agreement related to the Adams Acre 2 subdivision.
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries 6-0. 12.1, the Heritage Tax Increment District. Area 1, resolution to set hearing date. Oh, and Jenny will speak to us a little bit.
Yes. Mr. Mayor and Council, you're aware that we approved in 2019 a TIF project plan for the Heritage. In third quarter of 2020, we spoke to the Heritage developers and they had some new plans that would necessitate revising some of the TIF project plan and then creating a second project plan. So that is why you have two items tonight. The first item, Area 1, largely includes, and actually I guess, can you point from there? Largely includes the residential area and then some additional commercial space as well, and a great deal of infrastructure and park space. Area 2 is going to be the luxury apartments and hotel and senior living area. Mr. Jerry Jones with the Heritage Development is here tonight if you have any questions, but tonight is just kind of the procedural start on this process. The plans will be presented to you formally on March 30th, at which you'll also have a public hearing on both of those plans. so that the public may give comment and hear those plans as well. Tonight, you're really just setting the date and the time for those meetings to occur, and then a great deal of mailings and notifications will happen subsequently. Certainly, if the city attorney, who's worked very hard on this project, has anything he'd like to add, I would invite him to do so as well.
Mr. Mayor. I'd move to approve the resolution of intent to consider the adoption of an amended and restated redevelopment project plan for Area 1 of the Heritage within the city of Andover and set a public hearing for Tuesday, March 30th at 7 p.m. here at City Hall.
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay.
Mr. Mayor. Move to adopt a resolution of intent to consider the adoption of a redevelopment project plan for Area 2 of the Heritage within the city of Andover and set a public hearing for Tuesday, March 30th at 7 p.m. also at City Hall.
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. Motion carries 6-0.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
AFR purchase, 13-1 staff truck replacement.
Fire Chief Russell is going to speak with us about this.
I hope everyone's as excited as Susan appears. I guess Jenny's not going to introduce me as an MC.
Next to the podium, Chief Russell.
Mr. Mayor, Council, thank you very much for the opportunity. So all I'm bringing you this evening is a request to release this specification to request bids from vendors to replace one of our staff trucks. The truck being replaced is a 2010 Chevy pickup that we've nearly run the wheels off of. And the way this process would work is that we would release these bids, get the bids back, and bring all of that information back to you, so you would have the opportunity to either move forward with the purchase with one of the vendors or not at that time. As you know, the vehicle replacement plan is a multi-year plan, and we try to keep up with these purchases to make sure that our vehicles are still capable of running emergency calls. This is a vehicle that will be running emergency calls, and be economical and efficient as possible, get the most use out of the vehicles as well. Each year, we reevaluate the vehicles and take a whole bunch of data on those vehicles, plug them into a formula, and then look at what the results are and measure that against what we really are seeing day to day from the vehicle as well. This vehicle is very similar to the 2017 Tahoe that I drive. We have experience with these vehicles. So the specification that we're using would be a very, very similar vehicle to that, just a newer model. What questions do you have for me?
Will this be your only vehicle this year?
Yes. And I should mention that's the only vehicle we have planned in the budget. This is a budgeted item. I knew I was forgetting something. Thank you for teeing me up for that. We have $65,000 in the budget for this vehicle, and we have no other vehicles budgeted.
Sorry, one more thing. Not necessarily a question, maybe as much as when we released this bid, I believe last time we had an issue with, there was 3 bids. One of the bids was the lowest, but then another bid wasn't the lowest, but it had a rebate on it. So I don't know if this is a legal question with releasing the bid in regards to, I would like the bid to say what the lowest is with the rebate included, so that we don't have any of that discussion when it comes to us next. Does that make sense what I'm saying?
Yes. And the issue last time was not any of the bidders or any of the vendors. The issue last time was your fire chief. So he has learned his lesson, and he will make sure that you have the most accurate information possible.
If I remember correctly, too, Chief, it didn't include the tools on one of the bids. Is that correct? Didn't you, the bid specifically state it needed to include certain items, and those bids did not include those certain items?
Right. And so a case in point, when we bid the 2017 Tahoe, we got 2 bids back for the upfitting. We call it upfitting. It's adding the lights and sirens. Those 2 bids were bid from the same specification, but they did not include, one of them did not include all of the tools that were supposed to come with it. For instance, a topper that ended up being almost $4,000. So we'll do the comparison for you, and we'll make sure that you get every bit of information from beginning to end.
Is it not normal if a bid comes back and it doesn't include some of the items to just assume they might have missed it and then contact them back and say, hey, did you forget to add this to this bid?
So in the case of the 2017 Tahoe that I talked about, they missed nearly half of the bid.
Okay. So you didn't answer my question, really.
I actually did contact them, and they said that in an email, the owner of the company told me that I would likely be receiving from a bid that was closer to me, and named the company, and he said that that company is great to work with and we would be well served by them.
Wow.
He also said that he ran out of time on the bid and was unable to provide the rest of the bid.
Okay. Did you say a minute ago that, or when you were describing this current truck, that you did a lot of research and understanding of the need and the uses of, and that's how you came up with what's required? I find that exceptional. That is amazing. That, I mean, I'm sure it's always done, but the fact that you pointed out and that it is a way that you're doing this and coming up with what really needs, instead of just, oh, I think I need a new truck. It's way more in depth than that.
A great asset management tool that
yeah.
he's doing.
Yeah.
Yes, very good.
It's good for our public to know that we're not just throwing cash away without looking.
Yeah.
Well, and it's hard with fire trucks because your firefighters work so hard to keep them shiny and clean. And, we hope they look good. I mean, that's one of our goals, to make sure that we're taking good care of the equipment that we're entrusted with. So it's hard to know when the wheels may be falling off.
Mr. Mayor.
To Troy's point though, still, and I don't know if this is a JT question, but if the bid does come back and there's one thing missing, do we have to rebid that? Or can we go back to that person and say, hey, you forgot about the light bar on top? Because at that point, right, they know what the other bids are, right?
Well, we do, but they don't.
So it hasn't been made, all the bids haven't been made public?
Not
Okay.
until it's open for us. Right. So.
Okay.
To be clear, under state law, you're not obligated to bid this at all. And that is a substantial, important tool in the process we go through.
Oh, okay.
But as a matter of policy, if you have specifications in your bid and you receive a non-conforming bid, you should either reject that bid or reject all bids if you want to know the appropriate policy for handling it, because it's a non-conforming bid and it doesn't meet the specifications. Now, if it arrives before the deadline, is it okay to say, we're not going to be able to consider your bid? Maybe I worry about those because I would never want anybody to suggest that there were any communications about the content of the bid. To
Which
Troy's
is what
point,
would be happening if
which
that
which
happened.
which we would not do. We would never do that. We would never say, for instance, you have the low bid, but there's no topper on this truck. We wouldn't do that. We would just simply say, we've received your bid. You have another day, but your bid is non-conforming. That is the only thing we would ever do on a bid if they called and asked me. So your real option in policy here, if you receive a non-conforming bid, is to reject it as a non-conforming bid. Now, that doesn't mean if the other bid is much higher, you can't rebid the project. To Troy's point, that's exactly what you'd do, is let's rebid it again and reject all bids, which is a reservation of rights that should be in every bid specification, that the city reserves the right to reject all bids.
Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, JT.
I move that we approve the specifications for one new Andover Fire Rescue staff truck and allow the fire chief to release the specifications and review the bids or receive the bids.
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed say nay. Motion carries 6-0.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chief.
Thanks, Chief.
All right.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. I'm here for the banking services. It's time to renew we put proposals out for a 5-year plan for a new bank or current. All of the banks in Andover were contacted. We received 2 proposals back and 1 email from one of the banks that said that they weren't interested at this time. The others did not respond. The best proposal we got was from our current bank, which is Equity Bank, which is, they had a better interest rate and they didn't charge any fees. The other proposal charged fees and had lower interest. So it was kind of a no-brainer. We're recommending that you approve Equity Bank for banking services for a period of 5 years.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes, sir.
I'd move to accept a proposal from Equity Bank for banking services for a period of 5 years based on the submitted proposal.
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed say nay. Motion carries 6-0. 14-2.
I do have, excuse me, I do have one question. Why would they not want our business? I mean,
Because FDIC insurance only covers up to a certain amount.
Okay.
They have to collateralize, and some banks, that's what they have to collateralize for us is substantial.
Okay.
And some just don't want to deal with that.
sorry, didn't mean to
That's
interrupt.
fine.
That's okay, sir.
That's a great question, Tim. Thank you.
14-2, resolution.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes, sir.
I'd move to adopt a resolution designating Equity Bank as the depository of city funds and authorize the mayor and designated staff members as signatories and authorize Council President Tabor to sign.
I'll second that.
I know I was in that. Authorize myself to sign.
Do we need to remove that or no? Okay.
Any further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed say nay. Motion carries 6-0.
Thank you.
Thank you, Donna. On-call engineer, service agreement, Les Mangus.
A few years ago, we identified the need for transportation and traffic-related engineering consulting from time to time on things like intersection traffic analysis, street light timing, review of complex development site plans, and the US 54 400 corridor study. So over the years, we've had annual contracts like this where we authorize an amount not to exceed amount for traffic engineering and transportation engineering with Trans-Systems. And we call for their services on a task basis where they look at the task we put in front of them, they estimate what it's going to cost, and then the staff can authorize that work on that specific task up to only the maximum amount and only during that calendar year. So this year, we're asking for an on-call agreement for $50,000 because we have carried some work over that we thought we would get accomplished in 2020. And we're actually carrying it over into initiate in 2021. And we're asking tonight for that $50,000 authorization in an agreement with Trans-Systems Corporation.
Was that money used in other spots in the previous year?
No, it wasn't.
So it's
It wasn't.
it's a carryover or a wash?
Right.
Okay.
Right. We ended up with $17,000 left available in the 2020 on-call agreement that we didn't use. It just simply carries over as not being spent.
And this is different than the other agreement with the engineer because it's a different type of engineering?
This is transportation and traffic specific.
Thank you, Wes. Mr. Mayor, I move to approve the 2021 on-call engineering agreement with Trans Systems Corporation, Wichita, Kansas, in the not to exceed amount of $50,000.
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, say nay. Motion carries 6-0. 16-1.
All that, gosh, I think it's back as far as July of 20 bidding of school projects to widen, add a turn lane to get into the east entrance into the new Meadowlark School campus. There were some problems with acquiring the necessary right-of-ways and easements for that project. The engineer went back, made some adjustments to the plans, and then finally, after approval by the staff, put the plans back out there on the street for bid. We accepted bids in January, and my computer's locked up, so I can't repeat the date of that bid. But Kansas Paving was the low bidder, $117,550, considerably below the engineer's estimates and the other bidders. And we would recommend that you accept the bid and reject all of the other bids.
Do we feel comfortable with it, with them being 40,000 less than the second lowest bidder and 50,000 less than the engineer's estimate?
It was quite a surprise that it was that much lower, but there is some history of that. We've had Kansas Paving bid on other projects around the city where they've been considerably lower than the other bidders, and we're getting the work accomplished.
When you went back to the engineer and they redid, did they compromise anything as far as redoing it, if you will?
That original plan had some widening on both sides of the street. They were able to get all of the new improvements on the south side of the street only, so that it didn't require right-of-ways or easements from that property owner on the north side of the street.
Will there be any issues with the guttering or anything like that?
No, that's all been designed by the engineer Baughman Company.
And the engineer on this is who? Baughman?
Company.
Sure, I'll make a motion. Mr. Mayor, I'd move to accept the lowest qualified bid from Kansas Paving in the amount of $17,550 and reject all other bids, including bidders not in compliance with Resolution 20-05, and authorize the mayor to sign the contract for 85 Meadowlark Edition West 13th Street sidewalk and turn lane improvements.
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed, say nay. Motion carries 6-0. Thank you. Thanks. 6.2, Red Bud Trail restrooms.
Mr. Mayor and Council, as I'm about to present several bid awards in front of you, I would kind of give you a quick explanation of how we do our bid awards in the Public Works and Utilities. All of our bids are sealed bids and opened and read publicly. So at that point in time, and to address one of the previous questions, any builder would see if they chose to the other bidders bid at that point. So we would typically not go back and ask them to adjust their bids at that time. So I just want to clarify that since that was a question earlier. On this particular project, the Red Bud Trail, we have a grant for this project that requires some requirements from the federal government. The design was done. The bids came back. We felt quite a bit out of line. Well, the bid came back. In checking with some of the contractors, one of the contractors that didn't bid came down with COVID at the last minute and was able to provide a bid. Another contractor's estimator had resigned and took another position, and he didn't have an estimator to supply us with the bid. So in looking at that and talking to some other contractors, we feel like we probably will look at the plans a little bit more, but probably go back to you later with another. We're asking for you to reject all these bids, and we'll probably rebid it and bring it back to you later for approval.
Mr. Mayor, I move to reject all submitted bids for the Red Bud Trail Park restroom project.
Any further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. Motion carries 6-0. 16.3, rubber tracked compact excavator. Rick, carry on.
So this is a wastewater purchase that will be utilized by a lot of the other public works departments. Excuse me. Normally, we always generally take the lowest bid when we do something like this that meets our specifications. However, we did have one piece of equipment that we're not really familiar with, but it did meet the minimum horsepowers and so forth requirements. Did bid, they were $1,742.88 lower than the next bid. However, all the other pieces of equipment that were bid on, our staff has operated and been familiar with, and none of our staff has ever operated this particular brand or style of excavator. Additionally, the delay of about 2.5 extra months for delivery from the low bidder is substantial for us going into the spring when we utilize this type of equipment pretty frequently. It costs us about $750 a week to rent it, and we've been running up that considerable. An example, we use one for almost a week during the installation of the pads for the disc golf course. So we actually were doing that the week we opened the bid. So we ran about $700 just that week alone. Additionally, the Bobcat company did express that if we were to enter into agreement to purchase from them while we're waiting on delivery, they would give us rental rates at like, I think 30 or 40% reduction because they knew we were going to buy one from them. If you have any questions, I'd be more than happy to try to answer them.
I don't have a question, but I'd like to point out, and Rick, a lot of this is because of Rick. In fact, it's because of Rick and his leadership that when I worked for the city back in the day, if, for example, one entity had a backhoe, the other entity was not allowed to use that backhoe. And that's one thing that Rick has taken under and said, no, it's everybody's equipment to use. And I appreciate it. And I just think people should know that you've taken those steps to improve. So it's not a piece of equipment for the wastewater plant or the city plant or the streets or park. It's for Andover Public Works, correct?
Yes, thank you.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to move that we authorize staff to purchase the E35 25 horsepower R Series Bobcat compact excavator from Clark Equipment Company, DBA Bobcat Company, at the cost of $45,835.88.
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. Motion carries 6-0. 6.4, the Lodge at Central Park restroom remodel. Rick, again, will talk to us about that.
So much like a remodel in the bathroom, it's really hard to just go get and do a bid. We did more of a proposal process where we went to some regional contractors and said, give us a proposal on how you would remodel it. We did receive 3 pricing back in 2020, but then COVID hit and we went into a hold pattern and we didn't get it done last year. We had it pretty much ready to go. We didn't pull the trigger. We went back to the previous 2 low individuals and asked them to update their prices. One of them wasn't able to get us an updated price. We waited a couple extra weeks for them, but we're needing to get moving on this. They were also a little bit higher than the other one anyway, and knowing all prices went up, I don't suspect they would come down to be below the original, what would have been the lower proposal. So we do have about 60,000 at our ready for this, but or 75,000 in the total budgets between what we're carrying over and this coming 21 budget, with about 45,000 being left to do the remodel on the rest of the building. We got to do some other work too. This was meant to be a multi-year project, but we got delayed and certain things. So we're going to try to wrap it up pretty quickly. So the bathroom and that median or the entryway, the vestibule there will be the first phase we're going to do.
And they can't just throw a restroom on the Redbud Trail too while they're at it? Mr. Mayor,
Yes, sir.
I move to accept the proposal from Artistic Builders, Mulvane, Kansas to the not to exceed amount of $46,300 and authorize the mayor to sign the agreement.
Any further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. Motion carries 6-0. 16.5 Yorktown Streetscape. Rick Landreth, again, will speak with us.
As you probably recall, at the very last council meeting, we tabled this bid item due to some mathematical errors that we could not get substantiated prior to the meeting. Since that time, it's been resolved, everything's been validated. The engineer has given us a bid recommendation and staff has a bid award recommendation, and staff has made a recommendation to accept the low bid from Premier Landscaping of Andover, Kansas. We're also asking for to accept alternate items 1, 3, 2, 3, 6, 7, which is the entry monument column, the archway, the fountain, and the fountain light. At this time, we're not recommending accepting the pathway lights. We felt like a little bit on the high end, and we'd like to look at that maybe in a future project. If staff says any questions, I'd be more than willing to try to answer them. And the engineer that designed the project is in the audience also.
Can you repeat those add alts?
Okay, the add alts are, the first item 1 is the annual 1-year maintenance. That includes freshening the beds and everything like that. We wanted to get 1 year established on this. It's pretty extensive landscaping so that our staff would have time to get adjusted to it and take care of it and so forth. Item 2 is the columns that are on each side of what we call Dam Road. And then the item 3 is the archway that goes over the top. And then items 6 and 7 is a fountain with lights inside the fountain. I would add that the lights inside the fountain, I believe, are color changeable, and the lights inside the archway are color changeable too. So we can coordinate them to times of year or such.
Okay. Thank you.
I have a question on the materials. Do they match anything else?
Yes, it was designed to match in with the rest of the Central Park scene. So the limestone type-ish color, I forget the name of it, is like what's on our building, and like the amphitheater and so forth like that.
Okay.
Oh, I would also add that since at the last meeting you brought up the question of the heights, I did go back and look because I wasn't exactly sure what the heights is in the legal heights for vehicles going down the roads in Kansas, and it is 14 feet. Interestingly enough, unless you're hauling round bales, and it's 14.5 feet. So we're
gonna have round bales come through the park.
We'll still be high enough to accommodate them.
Funny. Thank you for looking at that.
Mm-hmm.
Rick, on the add alts, what was the price difference between what we wanted or what was in there versus what the not to exceed current request for the not to exceed amount is? Do you know?
So are you meaning if we took everything, what that price would
Yes.
be? The total price would be $721,667.49. I think staff's recommendation is $613,720.62. So
So roughly $108,000 difference?
yeah, somewhere in that.
All right, thank you. Mr. Mayor?
So just say, Joe, are you curious about any of this? Did you get brought up to speed on this?
I got
On the street? Okay. I just want to check, make sure there's no questions.
You haven't paid attention.
Okay.
So I do have a question, Rick, and I ask this, I think somebody asks this question quite often, but why is there such a huge price difference between the 3 vendors or 3 contractors? I mean, I'm looking at it and
Yeah.
I mean, is one trying to make less profit or are the other two trying to make more? I mean, I know that's a hard guess, but
Yeah, some of them have subs, and sometimes they have a different sub that'll charge higher. Some of them may be that they have plenty of work at the time and they're not as hungry. And sometimes people make mistakes on their bids and they just bust it and they get a little extra into their bid that they weren't counting on. So it's really hard to, to gauge. You're going to see bids vary quite often. It's not common to see them all within a 1 or 2%. I mean, it can happen and it does, but it's not the.
so are we worried that they're going to make up the price with inferior plants or finding trees in the, from their backyard? I mean, is Jason does this engineer keep an eye on what they're planning and the quality and?
Sure. So we will retain an on-site inspector to inspect their work and so forth. And we will look at it also, and they'll have to submit purchase invoices or not, well, I'm not right quite word, but sourcing of where they're getting their plants.
So they're not buying the black spotted pansies from the stuff that's been denied by the Kansas, inspector.
And it does also, it's probably in their interest to do the best too, because remember this project, we're going to hit them with a 1-year alternate maintenance on it. So they're going to have to take care of it that first year too. So they don't want to have to deal with that also.
Is that going to include replacement of any trees that
Sure.
die?
Jason, would you like to interject some of it? Okay.
Okay.
She's lost Rick, I heard that.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes, sir.
did I already make the motion?
No.
No. Mr. Mayor, I move to accept the base bid and alternate items 1, 2, 3, 6, and 7 for Premier Landscaping Incorporated and Over Kansas in the not to exceed amount of $613,720.62 and reject all other bids and authorize the mayor to sign the contract for said improvements.
Second.
Any further discussion?
One last thing. Would you add any outlets on that if you needed to have anything for Christmas lights later on?
So included in that base bid is lights out in the median area or outlets out in the median area to add lights into those medians. We did include that, and that's in the base bid.
Okay.
Good question.
Yeah, that's number 8. And yeah.
Okay. Any further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
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 All opposed, say nay. Motion carries 6-0. Joe, I didn't mean to put you on the spot. I just didn't know if you knew about the trees and all that entailed. All right, 17-1 wastewater clarifier repairs. Again, Rick will speak to us on that.
So it was probably about a year ago, we had one of our clarifiers develop an issue. We came to council back then and got permission to purchase the equipment, and our staff did the replacement. When they did the replacement and they got it operational, they decided maybe they ought to look at the other one and see if they got a pending failure. So when they got the east clarifier back up and running, they drained the west clarifier. And when they did, they noticed that, well, guess what? As it would happen, when one part's going to break that's about the same age and does the same thing, the other one's getting close. So it was a good call on their part. They identified it is not broken yet, but it is going to break. So we were requesting to buy the parts. The staff will put the installation again like they did the last time. And I would like to point out that we are blessed because not every city staff can make this repair. I would just tell you that we have great staff down there, and I wouldn't ask a lot of other staffs to do that in a lot of other places that I've been at. But in this case, our guys are more than capable of doing it, and they do a good job with it. And so we'll need this regardless of what our study comes back. I know we're in the middle of doing our wastewater treatment plant study, but the study's not going to come back and tear this out in the next year or two anyway. So we'll have to have this regardless of. And the funding there's more than ample funding in the budget to absorb this cost. If anyone has any questions, I'd be more than happy to try to answer this question.
Sure. I think I've complimented our staff before at the wastewater treatment plant in regards to saving us time or subbing out contract work. Can you guesstimate how much financially savings this would cost if we went to outside our staff?
I would guess it'd be about 1.5 times the cost. So somewhere 16, 17,000 is probably what we're saving if we hire an outside firm to do that.
Okay. And then also the study, in regards to the study and then us getting these parts, how much are we going to be, I mean, do you first, I mean, I know you can't predict the future, but having the study done sooner than later, in regards to finding out what a fix is going to be, because I feel like just like last time you said, this is the only place that can fix our equipment. So we're kind of locked into them, right? If the study says, hey, this is, are we going to be going to another place that they're the only ones that make that part, or?
So in the wastewater world, you kind of have systems, right? You have a Schreiber system and you have this other brand of system and you have this other brand of system. And a lot of those are going to have proprietary parts. I mean, it's just the nature of the beast. Ours happens to be Schreiber, which, by the way, did recently sell, and we're waiting to see what that means. They had stopped producing plants, so we're evaluating that with our study, by the way. So we may be changing the style of plant we do, utilizing the same equipment and so forth, but that's part of the study that Burns and PEC is working on right now. But you're generally going to be locked into these type of systems, you know, where you're kind of locked in and it's just kind of the nature of the business a little bit.
It's not uncommon in any industry like that. And then, of course, wastewater treatment plants have a long lifespan, so it's not uncommon for people to go out of business or move on, you know, so it's just not. And then you have to reboot and figure something out. So it's not at all uncommon to have very many people in that line of work. It's just not something people sign up for to design and build. Correct?
Yeah. So we will be, part of what we'll be doing is Brian and I and probably Sean will be probably traveling with Burns and Mac and maybe PEC to go look at a couple plants that have some similar styles that we could maybe modify after and go after as our style, to be prepared, because we don't know what the future holds for Schreiber. They had stopped producing new plants type, so they weren't doing a new system. They would only make parts. What we were hearing, I think it was kind of a family type business and nobody in the family wanted to take it over. We thought maybe they went into where they were only making parts, and that made us a little nervous because how long are they going to do that? So now that they've sold, we're waiting to hear what that means. They just sell to somebody that's going to make parts. If they're only going to make parts, we'll probably in our process evaluate that and say we want to look at changing the system or style of plant with our long range goals. But we have time and we'll do the evaluation on it, and we have very capable engineers working on this. I'm really happy with our engineering team on this one.
Well, Rick, I appreciate your planning on it and getting the study and that stuff done and looking forward thinking on it. So thank you. Mr. Mayor.
Yes, sir.
I move to authorize staff to purchase clarifier repair parts from Schreiber LLC at a cost of $11,582.00.
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. Motion carries 6-0. 18-1, high density mineral bond project. Rick Landry.
So this is a single source type of purchase. The only contractor in the region, and I think it's actually it's segmented out much like some industries are, where only this contractor can apply this in this region. Happens to be Andale Construction here in Wichita, Kansas. They usually start south and work their way up as weather warms, because this is a product that needs to be applied when it's warm. So they will start here soon down in Texas, and kind of like a combine crew, they kind of work their way up. And we were trying to coordinate our timing to line up with Sedgwick County and Wichita to get us the best prices, because they do work in Wichita and Sedgwick County on this type of sealing also. Previously, we did use a product called Reclamite. I will tell you, it was a little cheaper, but we were starting to question some of its results. This is a little bit more, but sometimes you spend a little bit more and you get a lot more. In this particular case, this product leaves the road blacker for a lot longer time. If nothing else, at least the resident feels like we've done something with Reclamite. It was really hard to see that they'd even been there in a in a short period of time later. We feel like we looked at this a long time. Our previous city engineer, Steve Anderson, and I looked at this type of material for several years before we decided this is the path we want to go forward with. If anyone has any questions, I'd be more than willing to answer them. I will add that we're going to start doing streets a little sooner with this product after we milled and overlaid. It's kind of like sealing a deck or something like that. After you put the deck in, you let it sit for a little bit, if you use CCA wood or whatever, and then you come back and you seal it. So our goal is to get some of our mill and overlaid roads a little faster and get this down, and then we can keep up every 5 to 7 years, depending on how it works here in our area and so forth.
So Rick, the areas in red, those are the areas that get the treatment this year?
I'm going to guess. Mine is in black and white, but I'm pretty sure it's red, the thicker lines. Yes.
It is. Yeah, it is red. The ones in red are.
I am right now too. Yes, the area's in red. Yeah. Which all those streets were milled and overlaid in about a 3 to 5 year period ago. So they're pretty good shape. What we're trying to do is keep them there. That's the intent of this project. It's a much cheaper alternative to mill and overland. Hopefully we'll delay the need to do it for a few more years.
So are we going from a 3 to 5 to 5 to 7, or as far as needing to do it again?
As far as the HA5, their material, their people tell us we should be doing it about every 5 years, but it varies on conditions and so forth, regionally and everything else, and the type of street. So we'll evaluate it, and we will. By that time, you'll see in the future CIPs where we put in monies to have our streets resurveyed with those electronic equipment that we did previously that you all got an update on back in July, I believe.
Yeah.
And we'll do that again before these streets would ever get done again. We'll know very clearly what the results of this is going forward, and it'll help us gauge how much our cycle should be.
And these streets that are on this plan in the red, were they on our graph or schematics that the trucks did and came in? And
Yes.
were these poor roads, I guess?
No, they're not poor roads. So you don't do this to poor roads. Poor roads, we end up milling and overlaying. And if they get really poor, then we have to tear them out. This is to keep them getting them to that point where that is much more expensive. So part of that presentation back in July, there was a curve, you might remember, and there's like $1. You spend $1 here, you get $1 worth of work, so to speak. You spend $1, it takes $4. You get a little further down the curves, it deteriorates a little more to get it back up to the same level. You get further down, it gets up to $10 or whatever. I don't know the exact numbers off the top of my head, so I'm just giving you a kind of example. So we're trying to spin it up here where it's a little bit cheaper and keep those roads in good condition. It's just part of our asset management plan that we have that you guys were presented with. These were part of our 5-year project goals. It's just right as part of what we got. And you'll see at the next council meeting a bunch of mill and overlay streets. Those streets are way further down the road, and those we have to mill and overlay to get them brought up. And those were also part of that 5-year plan. So we're trying to catch up. We didn't do anything in 2020 because of everything that happened, and so we've got a lot of work coming this year. But yeah.
Great. So part of the plan, not unexpected, kind of knew it, right?
Totally anticipated.
Thanks for your explanation, Rick. Mr. Mayor?
Yes, sir.
I move to authorize the mayor to sign a contract with Andale Construction, Wichita, Kansas, for high-density mineral bond services in the not-to-exceed amount of $296,030.10.
Any further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. Motion carries 6-0.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rick.
Thanks,
Appreciate your
Rick.
time. All right, member items.
Well, I guess I'll go first here. I'm really shocked that we don't have an executive session tonight. What's going on? This is like a couple years straight here or something. So, all right.
Like one?
No, I was just making fun. Also,
No.
Sorry, someone had to laugh, right?
Just wanted to thank the Public Works and Parks Department for, their well job on the disc golf course and all 18 holes of concrete tee pads are in, and so we're moving along pretty well. So hopefully, and hopefully when it starts to thaw out here, we might have a course. So. And I got one more thing.
Troy had been practicing throwing them in the lake just to get ahead of the game.
Yes, I did.
Well, that's nice. Well, it's frozen now, so.
Do they
Walk out,
float?
Break
Yeah.
it out.
Mhm.
I don't think they float.
Yeah, do the disc
Yeah,
float?
well, some of them do
Some of
float.
them, but not mine, apparently, but that's.
Yeah, yeah. So this thing here, it's been kind of on me since I've been on council, and I have never brought it up, but I wanted to talk just a little bit about the Pledge of Allegiance. And Pledge of Allegiance was written in 1892, and it's changed a few times, and in that that original reading, it says, "I pledge allegiance to the flag and the republic for which it stands, one nation, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all." In 1923, the words changed again just a little bit. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, indivisible, and with liberty and justice for all. President Eisenhower, Kansas, in 1954, changed it to add two more words. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, comma, one nation under God, comma, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. We always make a pause when we're saying the pledge, one nation, comma, under God, comma. And I've been in many Rotary clubs over the years, and we've always said that is one consistent sentence or blurb, one nation under God. It sounds better. It feels better. I'd like to make a motion that we would consider something like that instead of one nation, comma, under God, comma, one nation under God. So that's
So read it as it's actually written. Or say
yes,
it's what you're saying.
yeah. Because when Eisenhower adopted this, he said that the words under God were part of this, and it needed to be. It was one nation under God. So that's just my feeling. And any comments?
So I've been messing it up for 9 years, is what you're saying. That's fine. It's all my fault.
I mean, it takes a little getting used to, but
Takes a village.
But
does it?
like I said, I've been part of the Rotary Club here, and they separate it.
Yeah.
But other Rotary clubs I've been in other states, even Russell, Kansas, where I was part of for a short time, it's all one word. It's all one blurb. So just like for us to make consider that.
And we don't now.
We
One
we
nation
pause.
under God
Take a breath.
instead of one nation under God. Commas matter.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I don't know if there's a motion. Can we just pause?
Like I said, Councilmember Warrenton's made a motion to make that change.
Is it really a change, or
It's
we're not.
it's not really a
changing
change. It's just saying it the
It's
right
just
way.
how we're saying it.
I'll make sure that I do it that way from now on.
Yeah, and if we all agree, that's probably something at our next council meeting that we may want to tell people. We're going to say this, and we would like everybody to participate. So that's just my feeling.
That's cool.
Maybe Troy can say it next to the microphone.
Yep, could do that.
Well, no, I mean.
One nation under God.
You know, you're,
Oh, you mean next time? Okay.
yeah, not now. So I don't see a need to vote on it.
Sure. If mayor is okay with it, when we do the pledge of allegiance next time, if you don't mind me just saying,
Yeah.
I'm going to say it this way.
It doesn't hurt my feelings one way or the other.
Okay, cool. I'll do it.
Anybody else? Shelby? No, Shelby doesn't have nothing to do with it. All right.
I had an item.
Okay.
Susan, are you upset because Mike
Go ahead.
had mentioned motion? I don't think a motion was ever given.
It just dies.
Yeah, what she's going to reflect in the minutes is that a motion was made. It died for lack of a second, but the consensus of the council was that you would say it that way.
Concur.
Thank you, JT, for that concurrence.
All right, Troy,
All right.
floor is yours, man.
Thanks. Yeah, so we had just an amazing meeting today, everybody. We had a lot of items, but if you think about what we talked about expansion of the city, growth, new things. We had people saving people's lives that were talked about today. We had awards. We had people that have invested millions, tens of millions of dollars in our city that are still helping to expand the city. I think that we've done a pretty exceptional job with managing the growth of things. Although that's something to think about when we were talking about roads and the amount of money it takes to, if you have bad roads, to bring them up or whatever. One of the things that's always talked about is trying not to outgrow your ability to maintain what you have. So as we do add all this new stuff, something to think about is make sure that we don't do that. We know that a lot of our income for roads comes from the sales tax, and honestly, that's something that's being, I would say, attacked quite a bit in the State House, is our ability to tax appropriately, but so far so good. Although there is one item that's coming through this year probably that'll change the way that sales tax is able to be distributed from the counties back to the cities. But we can fix that with an interlocal agreement, it's my understanding, but is that correct, Jen?
Well, and to clarify, there is not currently a tax in Butler County in which we're receiving any revenue. Butler County doesn't have a countywide sales tax. So we won't really lose any revenue as a result of that. The sales tax we receive is unique to us, a 1 cent sales tax related to streets. That will not change. Many counties across the state of Kansas charge a sales tax countywide, and then that's distributed to the cities and the counties. The legislation that's being considered right now is that the state would pay all of that money to the counties with the thought that the cities and counties will get along and figure it out, but that the state would no longer put the money directly to those cities. Like I said, here, that's just not a current problem for us uniquely, but can see why other cities might be a little uncomfortable with that change in longstanding arrangement.
Okay, thank you. And one other item that would probably directly affect us with help with workout centers or health clubs would be that the Stevens and Genesis have a nice lobbyist now up in Kansas or in Topeka that are looking to make it so that you cannot, is it property tax?
It is.
Can no longer tax health clubs because they think that the YMCA competes with them, and they're a nonprofit, so obviously they're exempt from that kind of thing. And it looks like it's probably going to pass because they have enough money going out there to make it happen.
Again, we're somewhat uniquely isolated because our only health club is the YMCA, which doesn't pay property tax.
That's our only health club?
So we don't have the Genesis that you're talking about, those large clubs that are.
Rogue is one, yeah.
What about Rogue?
I don't believe Rogue owns their building. I could be wrong on that. I believe they're a tenant, but I could be wrong on that. So it's possible. And again, that is a small club. I think the cities that are very concerned are the ones that have those other, I mean, there's a lot of private clubs in a city the size of Wichita or something of that nature.
Okay. Well, there's fun stuff happening in Topeka. Doesn't sound like it's going to affect us directly at all. But it's just not okay, in my opinion.
And it could in the future, Councilman Tabor, to be fair, we don't know who else might want to come. So that's a very fair point to bring up and to express.
Okay. The League of the LKM sends out really good info. And I highly recommend that we all kind of pay attention at least to what's going on in Topeka, because it can and will affect us. I know that was a bad note. I guess I would go back to say how amazing the city is, and what we're doing, what we're accomplishing with it. I don't know. It's so exciting to be here. I don't know if you guys have had the opportunity to visit some of the other city council meetings in some of our surrounding cities. We are blessed. We're blessed because the city, because the people that are making it happen for us, and everyone here too. It's
Been
very,
waiting for
very
Ronnie
nice.
to throw paper over my plexiglass.
Oh, right. Yeah,
Yeah,
that was
so,
disgusting. I mean,
you know.
terrible, wasn't it? It was, yeah. Anyway, that's all I got.
Thing, and I'll just piggyback on what you're saying there, is that I'm very blessed with the council members we have, because y'all ask questions, man. And sometimes I'd like you to ask questions that you think somebody sitting on their couch that can't be here would ask. You know what I mean? Even though you know the answer, ask the question just so that they might not be physically able to get here or whatever, you know, to have questions to where they think that's what I would have asked. It's not that, you know, because y'all ask good questions. I'm not saying you don't. I'm very impressed. But sometimes if you think about it when you're reading your package, you say, hey, I wonder what the common person, what the public would be a better way to phrase that. The public would ask if they were able to sit. I'm as common as they get. So, but anyway, but I do appreciate the questions y'all ask, because they're pretty in depth in your conversation. So thank you.
I do have a couple member items, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to congratulate a wonderful seventh grader from Andover Middle School. Her name's Emma Chamberlain. I meant to have this emailed to Lance so we could get it put up here, but she is actually the winner of the Youth Art Month flag for the state of Kansas. Her flag is actually very cool, and I do apologize that I didn't get that so we could broadcast it up here, but she was awarded that award last night at the school board meeting. Out of all the, basically the art teachers throughout the entire state, they have to submit this into the National Youth Art Committee Foundation. And for the state of Kansas, she was the one who got awarded the flag. Under normal circumstances, they do a big convention. I believe they said last night, either March or May. I couldn't hear quite so well. Up in Chicago, where they basically fly all 50 states' flags that were proposed, or that were the winners. They're not able to do it this year because it is a virtual training or virtual conference. But she will be presented an actual flag up in Topeka. I believe in March next month. So that is really cool that our school district has a seventh grader that was able to win basically the Kansas flag.
And Tim, I'm sorry, what competition, what age range is that competition? Seventh to senior?
I think it's seventh, but I was looking online and it looks like it's all middle schoolers. So she is a seventh grader.
And then is that yearly?
Yes, that is a yearly thing. So she won the 2021, or must have been the 2020 to 2021 session. So
cool.
It was really awesome to see her accept the award and see her flag, because she was extremely proud of it last night, which I would have been too. I did participate in the school board last night. Our district is starting to move the sixth graders and ninth graders. Many of you who are parents would see that if you have a sixth grader or ninth grader, they are going back full time Monday through Friday, and they're adjusting the seventh, eighth, and sophomore through senior, adjusting their hybrid schedules a little bit. So if you have any questions, certainly reach out to the schools and go from there. I am going to push, after speaking to several parents last night, the mental health of our kids. Please reach out to, kids that in town, your cousins, your nephews, your nieces, your sons, your daughters. They're seeing a tremendous increase of mental health in the local ERs. It just bothers me to hear that a sixth grader tried to commit suicide taking his mom's sleeping pills. Seeing a third grader try and commit suicide because he's so depressed. It bothers me that we still have that in our world or our society. So please check on your kids and your neighbors, your friends, cousins, nephews, all that fun stuff. So that's all I have, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you very much. Anyone else?
I'd like to use this platform to tip my hat to the street department for this last weather event, just keeping the streets clear. I think they did a really good job. I mean, you could tell a definite crossover when you went into Sedgwick County from the Andover side. So I do want to tell you guys thank you. You guys are doing a great job. I know your community appreciates everything you do. So I want to tell you thank you.
And I do just want to point out, they got work on New Year's Eve for a snowstorm, and then they got work on Super Bowl Sunday for a snowstorm. So they have had a pretty rough winter in 2021. So my heartfelt thanks to them as well.
The city does have a lot of things going for it. I mean, above and beyond what most cities do, and it's incumbent on us to keep it rolling, keep it improving. And I'm excited about the opportunities before us. You know, I'm surrounded by younger folks and in this chamber, and it's kind of nice to hear I'm still old fashioned. So some things as Homer can tell you, and Troy and Tim, that I need to drug along into the future. So thank you. Anyone else?
You're welcome. I don't have anything tonight. I should have shoveled the streets on Super Bowl Sunday because it didn't really do my team any good. So Rick, just call me next time someone needs off.
So can I get a motion to adjourn? I need a first.
So moved.
Mayor, don't get to. All in favor, say aye.
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 All opposed. Motion carries.
Okay.